Welcome back, this is Team Alindel here. We're playing BTD6 and telling tales. Tales of the Civil War. We're continuing our discussion of the Civil War. And before we get too deeply into all the different battles of the Civil War, I want to kind of take a step back and look at how the Army was organized back in the time of the Civil War. We're going to take a look at the different elements of the Army and kind of what their own unique duties and responsibilities were. But before they do that, let's talk about our daily challenge. We've got basically looks like a naval battle. We do have a couple land-based pieces, the sniper and the mortar guy. You know, the mortar guy could become really handy. We could use him as a way to strip off camo, which would give us a pretty good mechanism to better utilize our ships and not have to worry about, setting them up for camo. We can set them up for maximum destruction. We'll probably have a couple ships. We'll probably keep a couple subs in as well, because they can hit the entire range of visibility. And the mortar guy, I think we're going to use him to... We may use two of them to ensure that we can strip camo off of stuff. And then we might use a couple snipers as well to help us in the process. But we have to get to level 80, which is a good way. I think with this crew, I could get close to level 100. I think level 100 might be a little ambitious, because I don't think we can kill off the black DDTs with these troops. There have been about half the people have won today with it. So we're going to have to up our game and see what we can do. Let's jump into the battle. Can't bring out Admiral Brickle right off the bat, but what I can do is bring in my first Buccaneer. We'll probably put a Buccaneer on this side. We'll put a Buccaneer on the other side. We might do a couple. We're definitely going to try to get to the top. We'll probably go top route with these. Maybe I'll throw a bottom one. Maybe some pirate ships in as well. But I can't imagine we'll probably run more than 3 or 4 Buccaneers. We'll probably run 3 or 4 subs and kind of go from there. So I'm going to sit here and I'm thinking about, oh dear, we're going to go ahead and have to bring out another one of these guys so we don't completely get obliterated at the beginning. That was not what I intended, but that's okay. With the 2 ships, we should be able to hold things back at bay. You know what? I probably should turn off auto start to give myself a chance to kind of regroup at the end of each round. 7:30. I'm going to go one more round here. We'll see if we can get the Admiral Brickback. What's his name? Brickle. Admiral Brickle. Oops. Let's see if we can get him out. He should be able to help us quite a bit win these early battles. And then we're going to continue to... Okay, now I can bring out Admiral Brickle. We'll put him like right here, I guess. As far over as I can. I'm going to set him up there. So my next goal is to bring out one of these mortar monkeys, because this bottom pass signal flares pops camos. We may even go to shattering shells, we'll see. Depending on how much money we get. But this should help us quite a bit. Let's go back to our conversation while we kind of collect some money from these guys. The Army had 3 different branches within them. They had an infantry, which was the majority of the Army. They had a cavalry, an artillery, and an engineer group. Each of these branches had kind of their own, like I said, duties, responsibilities, and I kind of wanted to go through each of these and give a feeling for what it was like back then fighting in some of these battles. And while we do, I'm going to go ahead and get this to a hot shot. I want to make sure we can hit. But we're going to also have to worry about camos, because I don't know if he can see camos or not. We'll find out here soon. I don't really play with the Navy guy very often. Admiral Brickle. Let's go ahead and get faster shooting. And this will pretty much probably get us a good chunk of the way to round 40. We'll get double shot, make sure we can kind of maximize what we can do. Then we'll move on to the mortar guy. As we were talking about, the infantry was by far the largest branch of the army, and it was what was responsible for all the foot fighting. This is where most of the battle occurred among the infantry. These were people that used generally a rifle musket, muzzle loading, which, you know, if you've ever seen anything from the Civil War, you see the guys who put the little ball in and they jam the rod in, because you're basically jamming in the powder and then the musket rifle. Once you get all that in place, then you can aim and fire. These were relatively accurate weapons because they were long rifles. Yeah, let's get him out bottom path. And were really effective for shooting. Now, when they got into close range combat, because what would happen is we would be standing at each other, we would fire our rifles, and then one side would generally charge the other. And because it... Did I just really sell my mortar guy? Oh my gosh. So stupid. And because it takes a while to reload your weapon, we could potentially make a charge at the enemy. They might get 1 or 2 volleys on us before we reach them. And then we would go towards hand-to-hand combat. The hand-to-hand combat back then would have been a lot of different things. They had like shotguns. They might have had a pistol, especially like an army officer might have a pistol. They might have a sword as well. These were all used in close combat. Probably the most common item they used was the bayonet, which they could just attach to the end of the rifle itself.
Battle stations.
Well, Admiral Brickle cannot hit camos. We need camo for support. And we're going to have to find that right away. But yeah, so the bayonet we would attach to the end of the rifle. Now all of a sudden I had a pretty effective weapon for hand-to-hand combat, because I had a rifle, which was, you know, a fairly large instrument. We'd have a pointy stick on the end of it. And between those two, we could do quite well in kind of the hand-to-hand combat side of things. Okay, I'm gonna start bringing out some subs. We'll put them... I'm just going to set them... I mean, they don't really need to be on anything because I'm going to go top path, and they can hit pretty much anything at that point. So we just need them to get their intel, boom. And so now they can fire. We'll go ahead and try to get them up to... we'll probably try to get both paths. We're going to go with the darts first. The only downside to like them is like I don't have any way to cover this here, because even none of the snipers are going to have range to see anything. So he's only going to be good to about here and then here. Okay. Go ahead and get another sub coming out here. We're going to go the same way, but this time we'll go bottom path with this guy. 400. Yeah, see, there's the camo working for us. I may bring another. I am a little nervous about like camo getting through in general because I'm not going to really prep for it. So what I might do is bring out another one of these guys and set their target like maybe like right here, because his target is there. We'll put his target here. And this way, I feel much better about our ability to deal with camo. Once we get him to level 7.
Excellent work.
Okay. We'll go ahead and give him a little bit more, but now I'm also going to have to worry about the DDTs. Set up some twin gun action here. It's like this guy, I probably need to get him up to destroyer. I got this guy as well. We need to get him going as well. Ugh. Maybe we can just get him to... Wow. Okay, we're on level 39. This is where things gets a little interesting for us. Level 40 is where... I mean, it's going to be dependent on how much money we have at the end of this round. So we'll go ahead and kind of just speed this up, because I think we'll be okay making it through this round. Okay, so we have 2,700. I can get one thing to help me. Oof. I am going to get the ballistic missile here. And we're going to go airburst dart here. Hopefully all of that will help us to pop. This will be a very short battle if I can't pop this guy. And we got what we needed out of that. Okay. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bring out my snipers. And with this guy, I think I'm going to go middle path. Yeah. We'll go ahead and set him on strong, make sure we can pop things. Okay. The other section of the army that had a lot of units would have been the cavalry. This would be the people responsible for fighting on horseback. They would be used to scout ahead for the infantry, and because they're on horses and they're fairly mobile, we could use them to move them around the battlefield and attack enemy from the side, rear, you know. Just give you options for attacking the opponent where they weren't necessarily looking for it. So yeah, we had a cavalry. They'd obviously be scouts to look forward for us, kind of tell us where the opposing armies were, and we could use them for quick strikes to the side or rear. They generally used the saber, which was a good weapon from the horse, and if you became dismounted, it was again another good weapon for close hand-to-hand combat. They also carried a short-barreled carbine rifle. It was easier to carry and use on a horseback than the long rifles that the infantry would use. But generally, they mostly fought with their swords rather than the guns. Now, the third element of our armies would be the artillery. These would provide fire and support for your infantry and cavalry. They used a couple different varieties of weapons, but before we talk about the weapons, let's talk a second about what type of ammunition they would use, because that kind of would determine, uh-oh, we're in trouble here, what this would all kind of look like from a weapon side. So the first thing you would have as an armament would be a solid shot. This is the cannonball that everybody is familiar with when it comes to like cannons. You would have this ball that would be thrown at your opponents. It would be used to damage kind of enemy fortifications. It would also potentially hurt personnel. But mostly, like if I had all these defensive fortifications, I'd want this large piece of lead thrown into it to kind of break it down and destroy that infrastructure if at all possible. The second part we would have would be like a canister shot. And this is kind of a grape shot methodology where I take a canister, I fill it with small lead balls, we then fire it out of our cannons. It would take these little grape balls, would go at a high velocity at your enemy, And it could inflict massive casualties onto... Go ahead and get him up to destroyer. Okay, we'll go middle route with this guy. That's good for now. And could cause quite a bit of damage because it's like a shotgun. We spray all these pellets. We don't have to be super accurate, and because the troops tended to be close together, it was a very effective way to kill enemy. The last kind was the shell. This is more common ammunition we see today, where we would fill our cannonball or bullet-shaped device with explosives. We would fire them across the way, they would hit, and they would explode. This was, again, a much better way to damage any fortifications and do quite a bit of damage to personnel because the shrapnel that was been created from these exploding shells that were flown from part A to part B. Okay, we got some more money here. I need 7,200. We'll go ahead and give him triple gun. We don't have any room up here for anything. Okay, I might go away from strong for now. We're going to go to first. I'll probably bring out a second sniper that I can put on strong. We'll just put him there. We'll make him a faster shooter. Okay, we continue on our journey. How's Brickle doing? Oh. And I don't have anybody in radius. That is really unfortunate. I probably should have put these guys here. So I will go with 2 more subs then that I can put into the radius here. And we'll do the same thing with them. We'll go bottom path. We'll need more money. And we'll go top path with him. And hopefully the Admiral will help us out here. They say I can put out more shells. Okay. Here we go. So we'll let this run. Let's collect a little bit of money. I'm feeling pretty strong right now. Let's talk about the actual cannons they would use. We'll go bottom path with this guy. They had what they called field guns, and these were your common artillery weapon used during the Civil War. These would be the cannons that would be on wheels that they could easily roll from spot to spot and fire upon enemy forces. These guys would use all the different times. Some of them would use solid shot if they were hitting like fortifications. They could use canister shot to shoot at troops, or they could use the shells as well to fire and hit in troops and really attack different fortifications that the enemies might have to soften them up so that we could do a frontal assault with them. You also had siege guns. These were larger, more powerful cannons, mainly used to bombard enemy fortifications. These would fire your solid shot. They'd fire shells. They would also fire kind of a grape shot, which would be a much bigger version of the canister with much bigger balls that would do, that would be able to shred enemy fortifications. How are we doing here? We are at level 48. We're well on our way to winning this one. I would really like... So we got 4 of these guys. I'm going to go ahead and give him ballistic. We need to get like these guys a little bit further along as well. How are we doing up here? Let's get faster reload. Okay, they're both firing at a good rate. Okay, this guy, we're going to make him fire faster. And we'll put him on a larger caliber as well as we get going. Really, our limiter right now is just money. It takes forever to get the money we need to upgrade all the pieces. But we'll get there. The final military unit that you would see in the Civil War, pre-Civil War, post-Civil War was the engineers. Your engineers were experts in building and explosives. So my engineers would build roads, bridges, railroads, and just as importantly, repair the roads, bridges, and railroads. You'd have a battle, the enemy would come through, they would damage the rail lines to make it difficult for you to transport things. You had to be able to fix those rail lines. Same thing with roads. There'd be a battle or a bridge. The enemy would knock out the bridge. Now I need to repair it so that we can get troops to go across so that we could transport munitions, supplies, anything we might need. The engineers would also be used to build fortifications so that we could defend ourselves. They would also give us kind of guides on how we could lay siege to enemy fortifications, how we could target and attack enemy fortifications. They would do mining and counter mining. So, one strategy to take out a defensive fortification would be to mine underground, put explosives, blow up the explosives underneath their fortifications. And so counter mining would be, okay, we know they're kind of mining towards us, now let's mine back towards them and intercept and destroy their mine. The engineers would also be in charge of things like mapping the battlefield or conducting reconnaissance, building and repairing camps, weaponry, anything that might need repairing. They would be kind of in charge of those things. I'm going to go ahead and drop an aircraft carrier, get us going down this path. This will come in handy when we get to later rounds. Now I'm going to come ahead and bring up another ship or two here. Give us a little more coverage. And I'm going to make these ships... These are going to be my pirate ships. Arg. Arg, matey. So go ahead and give them the shot ability. And work their way up into cannon ships. I think right now we're doing a pretty good job of defeating the enemy. Okay, now we just need more money. Now we wait to see if we can get more money. In the meantime, let's talk about what else the army would have. They'd also have support units. They'd have a medical unit. Soldiers get hurt in field. You need doctors, nurses to be able to attend with them. And so you would have a medical you'd have medical units whose role would be to do these types of things. You'd also have supply units, transportation units, basically units that were involved in the logistics. If I have to move an army from spot A to spot B, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get supplies to them? Food, ammunition, clothing, things we need to maintain our army. Logistics of all of that. You have groups that were designed to logistical elements of for your campaigns. Now let's take a look at how the army was organized at different levels, because we'll be talking about things like companies, regiments, corps, battalions, all of these different concepts. I think it would be good to know what these things mean so that when we use them, we know what we're kind of talking about here. So we'll go ahead and do a pirate ship here. Make him a little bit better shooting pirate ship. And we'll do the same thing over here with this guy. But we need more money for that. And then we'll make him into an aircraft carrier. Maybe come back up here and upgrade our snipers. But so far I feel pretty good about this. We seem to be handling our enemies pretty well. So the army would be... Well, let me revive that. The smallest unit of the army would be a company. A company would be made up of, about 100 soldiers, give or take some, depending on, how recruitment went and things of that nature. But roughly 100 soldiers, and they would be commanded by your captain. So a captain would have about 100 soldiers underneath him. There would be a first lieutenant who was second in charge, and then you'd have second lieutenants, which were junior officers in the company that would manage smaller groups of men. You'd have multiple second lieutenants that would have their own set of men underneath them. The battalions were generally composed of up to like 5 companies, and they were led by a major. So a battalion would be upwards of 500 troops. The regiment was generally made up of a couple battalions, which typically meant the strength of a regiment would be about 1,000 soldiers. Regiments were commanded by colonels. So when we talk about colonels, we're talking about people that were leading regiments of roughly 1,000 men. The lieutenant colonels would be the second in command of these regiments. Next up were brigades. You'd have 5 regiments into a brigade, which would give you roughly about 5,000 soldiers within a brigade. And a brigade would be led by the brigadier general. Now, next up, we would have divisions. Divisions were made up of about 4 brigades, which meant they would typically have a strength of about 20,000 soldiers. These were led by major generals. So whenever we see a major general, and when we talk about the battles, we're talking about someone who's running. Someone who's leading about 20,000 men. Now, multiple divisions would make up a corps. So as we'll talk about corps. They're made of up to about 5 divisions, which meant a corps would have the troop strength of about 100,000 men. And these would be led by lieutenant generals. The army itself would be commanded by a general-in-chief, which was appointed by the president. President on both sides of the war. Lincoln appointed the general-in-chief for the Union, and the Confederate president did likewise. Let's go ahead and make an aircraft carrier here.
Fire when ready.
And so your general-in-chief would have multiple subordinate generals. These generals generally were the ones who kind of ran the different corps, and it would kind of run each kind of battle area. So you would have these different corps that would make up kind of different sub-armies from the Union and South, and they would eventually lead into the battle. Now, what is interesting about this organization is the regiment size, which we talked about, which was about 1,000 men. Back in this time, back in the Civil War days, pre-Civil War days, each regiment would come from one particular state. And this was done for a number of reasons. One, it helped to ensure that each state had a say in the defense of the country. So we would have a regiment that would be the 31st Infantry Regiment of Virginia. They generally numbered them in each state. You'd have your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, on and up you go as you recruited and increased the size of your army. It also helped promote morale within a unit and cohesion, because the soldiers were fighting with their friends and neighbors, because they generally came from a small part of each state. Once the regiments were put together, they would then be handed over to the U.S. Army. So each state would kind of create their sets of regiments. They would hand over control to the U.S. Army, which then, organized the groups into more larger fighting forces. Now, this type of system also had some disadvantages. One, it could be difficult to coordinate movements of regiments from different states, mainly because these different groups would be, since they were kind of managed by their particular state, they would have maybe equipped differently. They might be trained differently. They might have different skill levels, different experiences. They may have some animosity between potentially states, which could potentially cause friction when trying to put this together well. It also perfectly organized for a civil war, because each state had pretty much their own military force. It became pretty easy for them to succeed and create their own war system. Because now all I gotta do is I got all these regiments, instead of them being part of the Union, well, I'm going to take them back, and now we're going to make them part of the Confederacy. So the organization was already in place for a civil war to take place, which was somewhat inconvenient for the United States, because it allowed these states to pretty much splinter off into their own fighting forces and begin getting the campaign and the war started. Now, the reality of it was the professional fighting class of the Army was fairly small, relatively speaking. It didn't have enough to support a civil war where the number of troops that were going to be needed were immense, especially for this time. As such, it took a while for the land war to really get started in the Civil War, because while the basic units were in place, the basic foundations for the Army were in place for both the Union and the Confederacy, they had to go out and recruit troops. Lincoln would order 300,000 or 400,000 troops to be called up. The South did the same thing. And so it took a while for us to gather the troops, put them into some type of military formation, and begin battles. And as such, because of this, like I said, it took a while for the game to get started, and that first year of warfare was not the best, because you had a bunch of untrained troops going at each other in war, because there just wasn't that strong of a military base within the U.S. to support this type of war. So that will bring us pretty much to the end of kind of what I wanted to talk about with respect to the Civil War. Because, we're going to be talking a lot about regiments. We're going to be talking about lieutenant generals and all these things. It's good to realize what size forces we're talking about when we're fighting each other. It's like, oh, okay, so I got a colonel, he's got support of a regiment, 1,000 men roughly. So we can look at formations and stuff of the war. We can make a pretty good idea of the size of the forces involved and what that may look like when they're fighting against each other. Okay, let's see if we can win this game. I'm going to upgrade one of these guys. And it's going to be the first guy to Shattering Shells. When we get to 11,000, I'm feeling pretty good about winning the daily challenge at this point. I don't really see much that's going to stop me from doing it, because this will allow us to strip the banding off of all the blue and reds, which will make it very hard for them to take us down. In the meantime, we're going to start upgrading our snipers here. We're just absolutely obliterating our opponents. I would like to get Bouncing Bullet, which will help us with some of the higher level big balloon pushes that will occur. But there's no way we lose in the first 80 rounds at this point. The question for us is going to be level 100. I don't know if we'll have all the pieces necessary to get to 100. But we can try.
Target destroyed.
Need him up to being a pirate ship as well. We're pretty much just handling our business here. I'm gonna go ahead. Let's go ahead and go to auto start because I'm not gonna probably add too many more troops here. And see if we can get through level 80 here real quick.
Target destroyed.
See, we just took all those bands off, the blue and red ones. Shattering shells is really helpful in that regard. Okay, here come the bigger. We'll go ahead and make this guy a pirate. Next up is him.
Target destroyed.
Now at this point, like this guy, since he's not all the way up, I may move him up here. And maybe give him shattering shells as well at some point. That way, like if we can pop a balloon here, like a green banded one, we can do that over here. Actually, I'm gonna make the target like over here. Kind of within his range. Yeah, see, that stripped some.
I have not yet begun to fight.
We'll go ahead and set him to target those. Moab. Here we go, round 80. Let's see what the green one looks like when he comes out. And we're just hammering these guys. Okay, here comes round 80. It's going to take a while for him to come out. He may never even come out because we got a sniper here. Just pinned him back here. There it goes.
Target
And victory is ours. Let's go, victory. Okay, well let's... We got all the pieces in place. Let's go ahead and... Wow, 440? Nice. A lot of bucks out of that one. I'm going to go ahead and kind of fast forward through this a little bit here. Let's see if we can get to... Let's fast forward our way up to level 90. Okay, we've made it to round 90. Here's our first look at the black DDTs. Let's see what we can do to stop them. Somewhere along here they'll come in. Here we go.
ready.
Yeah, see, we just don't do enough damage to them.
Target destroyed.
I mean, we destroyed them with the mine, but yeah, we're round 93 is about as far as we're gonna get here. There's just nothing we can do about it. We can put some mega mines in, that'll help. But I don't really have any good way of hitting these guys, so maybe we can go this route. Maybe that'll do it, but I don't see us. 91. I mean, we might make it to 93, but there's no way we survive 95. We're not going to make it this far. I'm about to lose my mind.
Battle stations.
Yep. Game over. 91. The naval troops just aren't good enough to allow us to make it through level 100. They're great for early game. They're great for hitting a lot of different pieces. But they just don't have the stopping power necessary for the bigger balloons you'd want to have. I guess I could have used my superpower with these guys to maybe got another round or two, but we weren't getting past 95 anyway. Yeah, like these subs are cool, but they just don't do any damage to the flying ones, and there's just not enough snipers, and these guys just aren't good enough either. It was an interesting battle. Like I said, we were able to win our daily challenge. We were not able to get to level 100, which is a little sad, but I kind of figured that would probably happen when we got into this. And we got to talk about the army at the time of the Civil War, how it was organized, the types of weaponry they would use, and kind of how they were organized, you know, what the different military units were and what they meant. Because as we get into talking about the battles of the Civil War, we're going to be talking a lot about regiments and how they moved and all these different military units, and it'd be good to kind of have a feel for it before we get into those discussions. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you want to see more content like this, hit subscribe. And as always, have a great day if you want to.